Okay, so talking about concavity. Concavity is very, very simply when your graph is happy or sad. We can have graphs that are concave up or concave down. Concave up looks like a happy face. Okay? You can have a piece of a happy face. You can have just one side of it or the other side of it. Oh, that was not a happy face. Sorry. All right, I'm doing great. Concave down is a frowny face. I can have a piece of my frowny face. Those are all concave down. So literally, happy graph, concave up, frowny graph, concave down. Here is a beautiful mother function, and I want to talk about whether it's happy or sad. So the first piece is smiling or frowning? Frowning, so concave down. And then my next piece is happy, so concave up, and then concave down, and then concave up, and then concave up, still smiley, right? And then the last one is concave down. So this is a silly thing to tell you guys, but when I started, it was just a couple years ago, we did a training, and during that training they explained to us that some teenagers have a hard time reading facial expressions, and it's just your developmental stage. It's just like where your brain and your chemicals and where they are. And it really affects, like sometimes your parents could be staring at you with pride, but you see anger on their face or disappointment or whatever it is. I'm sure that you guys don't confuse angry faces so much. But so when I have students, it made me feel better when I have students who are like, I can't tell if that graph is smiley or frowny. It made me feel a lot better about that concept because it just might be where you are developmentally. So what we can do, if I can't tell smiley or frowny, is I can make a little bit of an observation. The big difference on concave down versus concave up is where the tangent line lies. So if I graph on my concave down section some tangent lines, all those tangent lines are going to be above the curve on every concave down section. That wasn't the best tangent line, right? But every concave down section, my tangent lines, oh, I missed completely, are going to be above the curve, correct? Okay. Okay, so that if the tangent to F lies above the curve, you're going to be concave down. Okay, if the tangent line lies below the curve, that's when you're concave up. So you guys can see all these tangent lines are below the curve. All right, so if the tangent line lies below the curve, you're concave up. If the tangent line is above the curve, you're concave down. Okay, so F has an inflection point or a point of inflection. The terms are interchangeable where F changes concavity. So if my graph changes from concave up to concave down, that's a point of inflection. If I change from concave down to concave up, that's a point of inflection. Okay, so looking at this graph here, where do I have points of inflection? Not all of them.
Except A, B, and B.
At x equals, is there one at A?
No.
There's not one at A. Is there one at B?
Yeah.
Yes, because I changed from concave down to concave up. Is there one at C? Yes, because I changed from concave up to concave down. Is there one at D? Yes, because I changed from concave down to concave up. Is there one at E? No. Is there one at P? Yes, because I changed from concave up to concave down. Is there one at Q? No, because there's no change. Okay. An inflection point is different than a critical point. A critical point, you can't think of them at the same level. A critical point means what again? F prime equals 0, or F prime doesn't exist. If F prime is 0, that means I have what on my graph? A horizontal tangent. Okay, where F prime doesn't exist, I have a cusp, corner, peak, vertical tangent, or discontinuity. Okay. The comparable level of inflection point would be a local max or local min. That's comparable. Okay, local maxes and local mins, do they occur at every inflection point? I'm sorry, take that back. Do they occur at every critical point? Local maxes and local mins don't have to be at every critical point. But if it is a max or min, it's at a critical point. Local max or local min, it's a critical point. They're different. An inflection point is where I actually have a change in concavity. Okay? If my well, hang on, before we get there. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to talk about the values of the slopes as you look at a concave down piece versus a concave up piece. All right, so if I start with my first concave down piece, I start out with positive slopes. What's happening to my slopes as I move through here? They're getting closer to 0 till they get 0, and then what happens to them? They become negative. So the values of my slopes on this interval, they go from positive to less positive to 0 to negative. Right? On my next interval where I'm concave down, my slopes go from positive to less positive until they get closer to 0, right? The next interval where I'm concave down, they start out at 0, and then they go and they get negative and then more negative. I know my tangent lines kind of suck here, but so my tangent lines go from 0 to negative. Okay. If I was describing the money in my bank account or my net worth, and I said my values went from the money in my bank account or my net worth went from a positive to a 0 to a negative, how would you assess that? What happened to my net worth?
Oh, you had a lot, then you lost, and now you're in debt.
I don't want specifics for financials, but we would say that we call those values what? Decreasing, right? These values are decreasing. From positive to 0 to negative, that's a decrease. From positive to 0, that's a decrease. From 0 to negative, that's a decrease. So the values of the slopes are decreasing. The slopes of what are we talking about? The slopes of what? Of the tangent lines? So the values of the slopes of the tangent lines are decreasing. Such amazing chicken scratch. Okay. What do we call the slopes of the tangent lines? F prime. So this is saying that F prime is decreasing. Okay. When F is decreasing, what was our new thing that we learned in calculus to say? That so if a function is decreasing, what's the implication? Its derivative is negative. Okay? So if a function is decreasing, its derivative is negative. Everybody buys that? So now if F prime is decreasing, that means F prime's derivative is negative. We're going to call F prime's derivative F double prime. Hang on, let me just, so its derivative is negative. Does that make sense? F prime is decreasing means that F double prime is negative. Okay, and this is when my graph was concave down. All right, to sum it up, if F is concave down, the biggest implication is that the second derivative is less than 0. A secondary implication to it is that F prime is decreasing. If the slopes of the tangent lines are decreasing, that would lead to that concave down shape. That's the curvature that happens when the slopes of the tangent lines decrease. Okay, but in terms of what kinds of questions am I going to ask you very, very frequently, it's this relationship here. Just like when I say F is decreasing, you should automatically be thinking F prime is negative. Or if I say that F prime is positive, that should automatically translate to you guys that F is increasing. The same situation here. Okay, if I say F is concave down, you're thinking F double prime negative. If I say F double prime negative, you're thinking F is concave down. All right? Make sense? Okay, moving on to the concave up section. Okay, if I look at the slopes of the tangent lines, here my slopes start out negative, and then they're getting less negative until they get to 0, and then they get to be positive. So the values of the slopes are going from negative to 0 to positive. My next section, same situation, negative to less negative to 0 to positive to more positive. On this next section, they're just doing the negative to 0 part. I could have gone from 0 to positive. That would have been a same sort of situation. Okay, so the values of the slopes of the tangent line are doing what this time? Increasing. Okay. So the values of slopes of the tangent line, that's f prime, right? That's what we call f prime. So f prime is increasing. So its derivative will be positive. Summing that up, f prime is increasing. That's going to make f double prime positive, greater than 0. Okay. So here's your takeaway. When f is concave up, f double prime is positive. That's the main thing that we're going to focus on. If I say f concave up, you tell me second derivative is positive. If I say second derivative is positive, you tell me f is concave up. That's the main relationship that we're stressing here. Okay, a secondary implication of that, or really where that comes from, is the fact that f prime is increasing. The slopes of the tangent lines, when they increase in value, that's going to lead to that smiley curvature. Okay? So we have a theorem that says that if f has a point of inflection at x equals a, then either f double prime is going to equal 0 or f double prime does not exist. All right? But the opposite is not true. I can have my second derivative be 0 and not have an inflection point. I can have a second derivative not exist and not have an inflection point. The inflection point is only when you change concavity. It's one of the top 10 mistakes students make on the AP exam. So I'm not repeating myself for no reason whatsoever. It's because students love to mess this one up. Just like you don't have to have a local min or local max every time you've got a critical point. You don't have to have, but there's no word for that. Like we have critical points that can then turn into local extrema. We have places where the derivative is equal to 0. I'm sorry, the second derivative is equal to 0. The second derivative doesn't exist. That can turn into an inflection point. I've heard some calc teachers call them pips for possible inflection points. So calling all of this stuff pips that can then turn into an ip, an inflection point. Okay. All right. I've given you guys 4 graphs. I'm going to talk about it as though it's profit over time. Okay? Basic, simple graphs. These are the types of simple, basic graphs you're going to sketch for me in the packet I'm going to give you guys. Okay? I want you guys to first just list next to each one if it's increasing or decreasing, and if it's concave up or concave down, just next to each one so that I know that you're visualizing it properly. It's nice to have these labeled in your notebook just so that some students, if they're trying to think, that like they need it in front of them as constant visual reminders on when we're graphing on this stuff. So this first one is increasing or decreasing. It's increasing and concave up or concave down. Concave up. This second one in the top right corner is decreasing concave down. This one down here on the bottom left is decreasing concave up, and then this one has got to be increasing concave down. Okay, so those are the shapes that you're going to be drawing if those shapes are ever demanded of you, which they're going to be demanded of you quite frequently. The next thing I want to ask you guys is that if this is profits for my bookstore, I have 2 positive situations here and 2 negative situations here. Of my positive situations, one of them is amazing, like completely wonderful. I can't think of anything better for my profit margins at my company. I'm going to buy a boat and put T-Pain on my boat. T-Pain on my boat. Yeah. This very first situation is like the big ticket winner situation for my sales. Right? Why? Because my sales are increasing at an increasing rate or at a decreasing rate? Increasing rate. This is increasing at an increasing rate. That's a great situation. Okay? My slopes are positive and my slopes are increasing. So my profits are increasing, but they increased more last week than they did the week before. So I anticipate even greater increase for next week. This is a great situation for my profits. Okay. The other situation where I'm increasing is here, right? Profits are increasing. Why is this not as good? It's increasing at a decreasing rate, which means that my profits are still going up, but the change between last week and this week wasn't as big as the change between the weeks before. And when I level off like this, what can happen after I do the leveling off? After this level, I can then do what? I could now drop off. I could start to go down. I could start to increase again. That would be fantastic. I could just plateau there. There's a lot of options for what can happen to my sales figures after. So if this is my profits, this right situation, the bottom right situation is my profits, I'm going to start to worry, like, what do I have to do next to improve things? If you ever listen to, if anybody wants to go into finance or business and you listen to those conversations that they have on the radio or on the TV or whatever about finance, they talk about inflection points in the trends of things all the time because they do have a severe impact. They are places where crucial things can happen in any business model. Okay? My other two situations are like the bad news bears situations. I've got these profits and these profits. Okay, one of these situations, it's been a long haul, but I'm starting to feel positive about. And the other situation, I'm going to short sell my stocks. You guys obviously don't know what that means. It's just a really, really, really bad situation. Top right is like, oh God, right? This is my OMG situation. What the heck am I going to do? My stocks are, my profits are plummeting. Right? Sell the boat fast. Get T-Pain off the boat. Sell the boat. This is, if you think about it, my slopes are going from, well, zero or small negative to more negative to more negative to more negative. When something gets more negative, is it increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. It's decreasing. So this function is decreasing at a decreasing rate, which is counterintuitive because when we think something's getting more of something, we tend to think when you get more negative, that's a decrease. This one is then decreasing at an increasing rate. And that's because if you look at the slopes, they start out very negative. So we were suffering some major, major losses. And now this week it's not as bad. And next week, hopefully it won't be as bad. And then we can start to turn around. That's like what can come next is I can start to go up. And that's a much better situation than this like holy crap alert of everything is tanking. Top right. Okay.